Well, welcome to the Seven Figure Builder Show. My name is Julie Baranek, founder of Seven Figure Builder, where we help high achieving CEOs work smarter, not harder, with gorgeous insights to scale to seven figures and beyond. And I'm here today with my friend Ashley Brown. Hey, Ashley.
Hey.
I am so excited to have you on today.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
So, first and foremost, where in the world are you?
So I am in Atlanta, Georgia.
Nice. You're on the East Coast with me, which is
That's
fabulous.
that's right. That's right. Love the East Coast. Grew up in New York.
Nice.
So
All right. I'm in Maryland, so I'm
yeah.
like right between the two of those. So,
Okay. Yep.
very cool.
Very cool.
And for people that haven't had the pleasure to meet you yet, can you tell us just a little bit about what you do with your business?
Absolutely. So I have a brand and web agency, transitioned into the agency model in the last year or so. It's been an adventure. And I'm also transitioning into um, a niche. I'm niching down, we'll say. I still don't serve any particular vertical. I don't think that I ever want to do that, but I am wanting to speak to um, entrepreneurs, innovators, experts um, who are marketing themselves and growing their personal brands through thought leadership. So that is something that I am working on right now, and I'm really, really excited about it.
That's awesome. So, a huge part of that is just being able to tell your own story, right? And what
Mhm.
would you tell to someone that's struggling with that, or how do you help people with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a storyteller at heart. So it's something that I've always had in my work, whether I knew how to articulate it or not. And what I like to start with when I'm working with people is I basically say, run toward everything that you are trying to actually run away from. Like in your story, run to the stuff that actually makes you a little more uncomfortable. And the reason for that is because people relate to and gravitate towards humans. People who really market themselves and connect through their own humanity. And what that, if we're going a little bit deeper, it's comforting to see someone's imperfection. And so, when you're telling your story, you want to get into those little nooks and crannies of like, what makes you human? Not what makes you look perfect, because that's actually isolating and that's actually scary to people.
Yeah.
So that's the first place that I start.
Yeah, and I love that. I mean, it shows your vulnerability and it's definitely relatable, like you mentioned, and it helps people really focus on their why of what are they rooted in, right? And oftentimes that is uncomfortable, and we have to be vulnerable to really get to that root of what's driving us in this. And that really helps, push that story forward.
Absolutely. When I'm going through stories, we look at different milestones and we look at things that people might not think are important. They're like, oh, that thing just happened to me. Like, I didn't think that was special. And I'm like, well, wait. Like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
This is not information that you see every day from someone in their story. So, like, let's actually dig into that and like let's take a look at it. That's just something that I'm really, really passionate about, and that's what I try to work on with people in our brand strategy work, kind of moving into the messaging.
Mhm.
It all overlaps. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's huge that we don't often think about is the things that come easy to us or we don't really think about don't happen to
Mm-hmm.
other people, right? Like that's oftentimes where our gifts lie are in those
Yep.
things that it's like, oh, I just do that every day,
Yep.
right? But nobody else does. So that
That's
actually makes
exactly
it
it.
unique.
Yeah. And actually, that's got me thinking though. People always get tripped up on their uniqueness, or, the industry terms unique value proposition or
Yeah.
unique selling point. All of those things are basically pointing to one thing. It's like, what makes you special, right? And I find that people get really tripped up on that because they're like, well, I'm not special. There are like billions of people in the world. Like, so what if this thing happened to me? And I'm like, listen, like, There's so much about you that is special, and it might seem cliched, but by definition, you are unique. There is only
Right.
one of you, right? And so your values combined with your life experience, combined with, your personality and what really makes you tick and gets you excited, like that, all of that stuff makes you special, right? But you can't see the label from the inside. So that's why it's so important, I think, especially if you are in that 6-figure, 7-figure range. Like if you haven't already, that's why it's important to work with someone for brand strategy, right? Because we're getting to the essence of who you are. And that means like finding the through line um, in terms of like everything that you bring to the table and everything that you're able to show people through your business, like about yourself. It's really fun work and I love doing it.
That's awesome. And you mentioned earlier about us not having to be perfect, right? Like so often we just need to get ourselves out there and do messy marketing. But like, what do you see with people with their brands as they evolve? Like, do you see issues there, or what do you see?
Yeah. So this is always, it used to be harder to articulate for me, and it still is kind of a tricky thing, right? Because you don't want to come off too perfect. And it is important to show that imperfection. While at the same time, humans are very visual, right? It's important to have a system going on with all of your branding. So, number one, not to be confusing here, but brand and design are two different things, but they do work together, right? So, it's important, like, number one, to zero in on your brand, your essence, what makes you special. So, getting all that foundational stuff in place with your brand. So, even if you are, still DIYing something or things are not looking as polished as you would like them to look, people can still appreciate who you are, right? People will still love you and be attracted to you, and um, they will, understand who you are because you are sharing and you have an understanding of your identity as a person, as a business. And then, from there, people can see your journey. Then you can come to people like me, who do just more dialed in strategy work from a place of like more experience, right? And then also the design work, and you can grow from there. So I think just a mistake that I see people make a lot is that they skip that strategy work. Mostly, and I don't even think, it's not me trying to be snobby, like, oh, you have to do strategy with a professional, and all of this stuff. It's not, that's not the case. I just think it's actually more of like, strategy to some people feels like nebulous. Like they're like, what does that mean? What do you mean? Like, I have a mission statement. Here it is, right? And it's actually just like a series of things like working together, like exercises and thought processes and learning about who you are and making that manifest through visuals and like through brand systems so that you can repeat that language and so that you have patterns happening where people are making the connection that, oh, this is you, like this is Julie, oh, I know that's Julie, like that feels like Julie, right? And so, people don't know what they don't know, which is also a reason to even have a strategy session or a VIP day or some sort of smaller package if you can't do full on brand strategy. But it's so important to do that because your strategy, your brand strategy actually connects to like every part of your business.
Yeah.
Like people don't realize, right? And it's because in at least the online world with small businesses and solopreneurs and stuff, branding, people always think of the visual. But what is not understood is that the very foundation of branding is all of the internal stuff that no one can see. It's intangible. And so a lot of the time it's confusing because if you go to a copywriter first, your copywriter actually is probably going to be doing a part of the branding process with you. They're going to be asking you questions that are a part of strategy.
Right.
Same with if you are working with a business coach, you're probably going to be establishing some strategy there. They might not be calling it that, but that is the foundational like part of your brand strategy. So you might be getting it from different angles and not know it. And I would argue that we really get into nitty gritty from all angles when you do brand strategy and then go into your design process and whatnot. So,
Yeah. And ultimately, like you mentioned, it comes down to the clarity, right? Like you need the clarity of what are you trying to
oh
accomplish?
yeah,
And that's so often an evolution. Like your business changes over time and where you're headed changes.
yep,
And
yep,
so you need to come back and revisit it. And
yep,
how often, like this isn't just a upfront thing, right? Like people
right.
come back and check in. What would be a sign that you would say to somebody, okay, you really need to go back and revisit your brand strategy?
Oh yeah. Oh, this can come from so many different angles. I would say the first thing is like, maybe 2 years ago you did some sort of branding. It's been working. You've been working with a lot of people, and in that work, you've been realizing, oh, I like to work with this type of person, not this type of person, right? So like that's something that I went through in the last year, and that I feel like no matter what, you are going to somehow find yourself going like, oh, I need to revisit my branding here. You're going to go back to the table and, you know, maybe initially you were targeting early 20s, um, and maybe you didn't like put it out there explicitly, like seeking, women in their early 20s and blah, 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 right? You didn't make it that clear, but like you were trying to create your branding to speak to those people. And somehow, some way, you actually attracted women in their mid 40s who were actually going through a career shift. And, you figured out that pattern. You were like, whoa. And so then you might want to go back to the drawing board and then get really intentional about that because you figured out that you really love working with them actually. And the women in their early 20s, they were kind of just a little all over the place. They didn't really know what they were doing just yet. And so it was more difficult to work with them, right? So then you're going to want to gear all of your work toward that audience that you are now much clearer on. And from that, your messaging will become clearer. From that, you might take a look at your values then and say, like, oh, how do I connect with this group through my values? And what does that mean? Who is this person? What might they be going through? So, a little more than the demographics, you're going to go into the psychographics, right? Who are they underneath all of this? And then that helps you with all of your content. And then all of a sudden, maybe you don't want like all this bold typography and all of, a lot of trendy things right now, like a lot of solid line borders and things like that are very trendy going towards a younger audience. Maybe you want something a little more classic. That means you're going to go towards a serif in your design. And maybe you're going to soften the colors a little bit and just things, big and small things. But as you can see, like just going through this very random hypothetical example, things start to shift when your audience shifts, right? And just another point to make there, it's like at the beginning, if people are newer, and they still want the brand strategy, that's okay. That is okay too. I don't stress people out on audience, but it's really good to just either you can approach audience in different ways if you're not sure. And then once you get out there in the field and you're marketing and you're selling and you're prospecting and you get a better idea, then you can just evolve just like you're talking about, right? Because things change over time. They absolutely do. But that gives you clarity and then you can get really specific.
Yeah, for sure. And it all comes
So
back to, like you were saying, who is your ideal client? And that will often shift over time. But the better
exactly.
you know who they are, what they like, what they want, how you can serve them, then
Mm-hmm.
everything else can be baked around that, right?
Exactly. Exactly. In the way that like once you find that audience that you love or that you figured out, oh, I was attracting this person, right? You can then take a look at your operations and be like, what do I need to change here to make things like client delivery, you know, and packaging and all that stuff geared toward this audience? and more specific, like how, everything that you do can kind of shift from having that clarity. And it makes it so much easier for you, and it gives you like a North Star if you go off track. So I just like to tell people that like your brand strategy actually takes away a lot of the confusion for yourself, and you can then start answering like tough questions in your business. You can be like, does this make sense? Oh, maybe I should get rid of, like, retire this package. This doesn't actually speak to these people. So it's really cool. I love how far reaching brand is.
It's everything.
It's everything.
And as you're listening, if you're feeling lost, then that's where you need to go back to. Get somebody that can help you, because so often, like, we think we know what we want in our heads, or we know what we're supposed to do, but we don't know what that right answer is. And it's so helpful, I find personally, to have that mirror of somebody qualified to say, all right, this is what you're saying, but this does not align to what, all these things need to line up. And it's really helpful to have that expert, to say that back to you and give you your own clarity in where you need to go with your business. So I have much respect for what you do.
Thank you. Yeah. You just said something that sparked a thought for me. I just want to share with the audience, not everyone all the time needs brand strategy. Like, it really depends on where you are in your journey, in your business journey. And like, sometimes you do just need certain tweaks in different places, or like, for a certain project or whatever, you just need a designer. You don't need to go super in depth for things like that. But I do want to share something that I experienced before I was offering and actually requiring the strategy in like the full-on custom projects. So I've always loved design, and that's kind of how I got into doing what I do. It's just so fun. It's so great to see something visually transform. But what I was noticing was that people would come to me, even more experienced business owners, and over the course of the project, it would become so clear that there was no strategy in place, and we'd have a really difficult time. So if you've ever heard a designer kind of gripe or joke about, oh, I got feedback and the client told me, oh, I don't know, I just wanted to pop. Right. I feel like, don't worry, like, I totally have probably said that, so, before I was a designer. But, it's like feedback like that is not helpful, and it doesn't serve anyone, because we don't know what that means. Like, to who, in relation to what? And so what I was finding was that people were coming in with holes in their strategy, and therefore they were using and standing on shaky ground, which was basically their likes and dislikes, their own preferences, right? So I'd have someone go like, oh, I don't know, I don't like that color, but I don't know what should be there. And, and that's one pretty simple example, but it was just really clear. And the feedback was very shallow, because we didn't know what to measure it up to. Like, what
are we trying to accomplish?
So yeah, exactly. What are we trying to accomplish? What is the goal here? And so immediately when I started building strategy into things and getting better in my own strategy practice, I saw like a difference, just a really big difference, because what you're able to do, and it's an art and a science, right? But what you're able to do is have a conversation once you're clear about who we are talking to, right? Our relationship to them, what they want, and how you can help them.
Right.
Suddenly, things like that become very clear.
Yeah. And it's not about your own, it's your business, right? So it's partially your own likes and dislikes, but it's about your client. It's about what do they want and what's going to resonate with them.
Right. And we don't have to make it robotic, right? Because actually the whole point is your strategy should feel like when you try it on and you've been talking through all of these things in your business, and you get to a place where like, yes, like this is what I'm trying to do. All of a sudden, all of the external stuff that people see will fit. It will be like a nice snug fit, and you'll be like, yes, that makes sense. Oh, I didn't think of it this way. But since we're talking to this person and this is what I'm really passionate about, now that choice, that makes sense. And I've just seen people actually be able to go through that thought process of being like, well, that wouldn't be my first choice according to my own preference, but I really see how that makes sense. And I really like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go
And
with
that
that. And
works.
now, right. And now that I have that clarity, if it doesn't work out, now I know how I can tweak it. And it's just like, it's so magical to see that happen. Because there's something else that I say to people. I say, like, your business starts with you, but it's not about you. So you just have to be clear on that. Like, if it's about you, then it's kind of a hobby, and
Yeah.
it's just about you. And that's a whole different story, right? But if you truly are helping people and you want to solve problems for them and really help them transform into the next level version of themselves, then you really do have to consider them and what will attract them.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And as you've gone through this, and you've kind of already touched on it a little bit, there's an
Mhm.
evolution in your own business, it sounds like, and an evolution
Oh,
in your
yeah.
team's businesses.
Mhm.
How have systems and automation, how have they factored in? Have they saved you time in that process? What have you found?
Oh, oh my goodness. In my own business, truthfully, I always like to be transparent about this. Like, I have been kind of a ghost for a little bit because I have been worrying about, well, not worrying, that's not a good word. I have been working hard on the client experience and everything behind the scenes, um, because I am working on attracting and working with a more sophisticated client further along in their journey. And so what that means is I can't just slap a higher price on things and be like, yeah, I'm so expensive, and then have everything on the back end be the complete opposite of what I marketed it to be. Like, that's not cool.
Right.
And not that I do that, because just want to toot my horn here. I have a lot of repeat clients because we have a good time together. And I truly care about them. But I am an ADHD warrior, and let me tell you, things can slip through the cracks easily if you're not on top of it. And so manual things, not cool. And using that as an excuse to say, like, oh no, I made this mistake. Oops, sorry. Oh, I made this mistake. And then constantly have it happen over again. That's not cool. I've been a bit of a ghost because I'm just automating a ton. The things that can be automated, you're not gonna get a ghost or a robot through this process. Don't worry. I'm very like high touch in my actual services, but things that just are very manual and take a long time in my business, like, you know, that I've just been working on that. And those things, like, that sounds very operational, right? But that has to do with your actual, like, the things that I have come to realize are important in my brand experience have to do with operational things in my business. Same with marketing. I've figured out a lot of ways to use systems and automations in my marketing to deliver on my brand promise. So all of that is coming. What I would say is, like, bringing it back to the client side, the whole process of branding in and of itself, like what you get as a deliverable is like I hand you a system, like a brand system, right? So if you've heard of things like brand standards or brand guides, we're handing you, somewhat of a framework. It's a visual framework for you to use. So you don't want to be out in these internet streets, being like, oh, today I love red. So I'm going to make all this stuff red over here on LinkedIn. And, this color that Kylie Jenner is wearing, oh, it's to die for. So let me use that over here. And, you want consistency, making sure that you use things like your brand guide. Some people call it a brand Bible, because it might be a little more comprehensive. But you'll want to use things like that. I mean, I even help clients with, like, messaging, right? Their messaging guide. So sometimes you'll get an actual guide for that, so that people on your team or other marketers that you work with can write copy better and write sales pages better, things like that. So ultimately, you should walk away with a brand system in place. The automations, sometimes those are built into the design process that we do. If you're doing a custom project with me, to again enhance the experience that people are having with your brand. but I'm not an automations person, although I love them and I'm a nerd. And I was like, so thinking about like, how can I make this more part of my business? Ultimately, those conversations do come into play where I'm like, you can automate this. Like you can, you can do this thing to make it easier for yourself and for your audience. So all of that comes into play for sure.
Totally. And that's where I totally geek out, just for the record, with all the automations and data and all that fun stuff.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But the things you mentioned, I think it's really important to realize that all goes back to the customer experience. Like so often we think about the customer experience as the shiny stuff on the outside. But if you have all the shiny stuff, but yet your foundation of your deliverables are crap, you've now killed everything that you've done in your business. So it's so important to have those strong foundations, which come back to the systems and the SOPs and all the dry stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Feels so
boring.
Yeah. But so often we have to go back and revisit it to say, okay, we've got gaps here and here. Let's plug in those gaps, make that customer experience really solid. And then we can push ourselves out there even more and bring in more clients. And then everything runs so much smoother.
Yep. It is so true. It's so true. And especially when you get to a certain level where people, they know that your work is good, or you're trusted to a certain point, or you're making a certain amount, like you really have to look at that. And whether you like it or not, like your brand is connected to that. Like it's your brand experience is really, really big. So there is, at a certain point in your journey, like you can get away with certain things for sure. People are always talking about the messy middle, which like I feel like I'm just coming out of. And like doing things messy, sure, to a certain extent, yes. But if you want to appeal to a more sophisticated audience, or a certain audience that's maybe harder to reach, then you need to really think about that. Really, really, and just be consistent, not only in front of everyone in your marketing and sales, but then behind the scenes. That's where it really matters. So
yeah, and the brand guidelines that you mentioned, or the brand Bible, whatever you call it, I love them personally because I find it so helpful, not just to have it up front, but to go back and revisit it and audit myself to make sure I'm being to that original story. Or if not, if fonts have slightly shifted or my audience has shifted, like you need to go back and revisit that so that you have those consistent guidelines and you can follow them and your team can follow them as your team continues to grow. But as you're building out the page or giving it to an agency or working with a designer or whatever, you can come back and say, okay, this is where we're at. This is how we present ourselves. This is the framework that we should use. And then it matches and feels consistent across everything that you do. So I love them personally.
Yes, they're so helpful. And I've been doing some research actually recently because I want mine to be a little more user friendly. I think most of us till this day usually get like PDFs of our guides, but I kind of want mine to be a little more interactive. So I just found a tool. I'm very excited to try it out so that it's more fluid and people might be able to change it. We can take a look at it again, and it's more like clickable and usable in the moment. So yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. So you've accomplished a ton in your business with, yourself, your clients, all of that. But how do you define success? What does that look like for you?
I feel like this has shifted over time, which is totally fine. But for me right now, I think having choices and the luxury to step out of my business without everything falling apart.
Love that.
That would feel like success to me. I guess that's one version of success for me. I think a lot of success for me also means just freedom. And I know that's like a big one, and that's probably an overused word in relation to online business and entrepreneurship. But for me, like freedom of time and just having like the freedom of choices. Yeah. I think that's the one for me.
No, I
Yeah.
love that. And I've found, at least in my career, that the best leaders that I've come across, in my opinion, are the ones that can go on vacation and things don't fall around them. Like they build up either the structure, the systems, the automation, or the team, or all the above to support
Mhm.
them. So you have that flexibility, you have that freedom. And that's why so many of us go into this to begin with, right? Like,
Yes,
that
yes.
you-
Oh my goodness. And it's such an adventure. It's like a roller coaster,
yeah.
to get there because you don't know what you don't know when you're starting out. It's like you're so excited to get to it, but there's a journey. There's a journey to it. So yeah, but I'm so excited. Like I said before, I was like, I'm coming out of the messy middle. I've been in business now for a little over 5 years. And oof, there's been so much.
What was that journey, if you want to share?
Well, I mean, most people here, they won't know, but I actually was an actor for 20 years. Yeah, yeah. And so my last show was Porgy and Bess in Santa Barbara. And I'd always been creative, but being a performer, that was a huge part of my identity. And I just couldn't, I felt I had this inner feeling like knowing that I needed to step back for a bit and just kind of figure out who I was as a person. And what's funny is now looking back, I feel like everything is making sense because for me, the brand process is about identity and it's about relating. Find just self identity and then just like how we identify with other people and how we relate to other people. And so that's what I was kind of going through, that crisis, like that inner turmoil of like, well, I'm an actor to everybody, but like, what about Ashley? So that's kind of like where this whole thing started. And I didn't quite understand like what branding was and what I was getting at. But yeah, I stumbled into design I was someone's business manager, I guess you could say. And I stumbled into this because they asked me to do like a sales page for them. They were doing a collaboration with another entrepreneur. And I was like, yeah, I can do it. And I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. So I figured it out. I went to work, did my research, and that's where everything started. Then I just went onto my Facebook one day because I was like, well, that was fun. And I was like, hey, yeah, I'm doing websites. And I like almost had a heart attack because I was like, $500. Oh my God. Yeah. I was like, oh my God, no one's going to buy this. And I just remember like getting tons of messages. And then the first person I ever built a website for, they were like, are you sure 500? And they were like, how about, they're like, I'm going to pay you 1,500. And I was like, what? Yeah. They were like, you need to charge more for this. Like, it's fine. It's the beginning, but like, this service is worth more. So I'll pay
Right.
you 1,500. And
That's
I was
all.
like, oh my God, this is amazing. Yeah. Yeah. So that was great. That's where it all started. And over time, I'll just make it short. What I have noticed is that too many times people will kind of brush aside their identity and I want to say be something else, but there's like this inner conflict of people just wanting to hide but be seen at the same time. And I've gone through that in my own business, ironically, even though I'm technically like someone who is in the visibility realm, right? But yeah, over time, I've seen that in my clients, I've seen that in myself, and that's kind of how I've gotten to this place where I am a champion for brand strategy and really, really being rooted in your identity and being proud of that, and creating a body of work with that as the foundation.
I love that. And it's funny, from the outside, that connection doesn't seem natural, but totally makes sense to me. Where as an actress, you're constantly trying to, you have to brand yourself. Like you have to
Mm-hmm,
sell yourself constantly, right? And you have to know
mm-hmm,
who you
mm-hmm.
are, and you're taking on other roles. And so you're kind of trying
Yeah.
things on for size. And so I can see, that foundation that kind of shifted straight into the design world. But I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah, yeah, definitely coming full circle.
So
It's
often it
pretty
does,
cool.
right?
Yeah, yeah. Like when I started, I was like, how is this connected? Like what? They're definitely two creative things, but I wasn't sure like how it would all come together and if ever my acting work and performing would inform the
Yeah,
work that I'm doing now. And like suddenly I'm like, whoa, this is pretty cool and it's pretty powerful as well.
that's
So
amazing.
yeah.
So what do you have on the horizon? What's the biggest life-changing goal you have this year?
In business or personally?
Whatever you want to share.
Gosh, I feel like these two are connected, but I would love to. I think my husband and I are probably thinking of starting our family. Yeah, I'd really love to in the next like year or so um expand our family. So what that means is that's very much connected to business, right? Um so I'm actually rebranding right now. We're about to release our new brand and website and some new services. A lot of things are being revamped. And so the process has taken much longer than I was thinking it would because those life things
Yeah.
have to be considered. Like in the midst of designing stuff for your business, you actually have to do some life design as well. And so those are things that I am thinking through. And that would be a big shift. So I can't ignore that in my business. And
No, that's life-changing for sure.
it's life changing for sure.
Yep.
Exactly. That's what's coming up. I'm excited for it. And now that I do have clarity in where I'm going brand wise, it makes it so much easier to plan for it. So not to say it's easy, but it makes it a lot easier.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, as people want to come check out your new branding and come work with you, where can they find you online?
Absolutely. You can go to queencreative.com and you can find me there.
Fabulous. And we'll have all the links for that and any socials to come find you online. And if you had the attention of the whole world for 5 minutes, what would you tell them?
I would tell them, ooh, good question. Good question. I would tell people to, oh, what I said before, you know what? How do I want to say this? I want people to tell their stories and really be transparent about their imperfect selves because that is what makes you interesting. That is what makes people want to be your best friend. That is what people relate to. And that's how you build community. So
I
just
love
be
it.
your imperfect self.
It sounds so easy, right?
It's the stuff that you actually think you don't want to say to people or don't want to tell, the parts of your story that you want to hide. Those are the very things that will help you to actually make deeper connections with people.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, thank you, Ashley. This was a lot of fun being on today.
Thank you so much. You asked such great questions. You're awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. And if you found value in this episode, please do share it. That's how people find us, and make sure to subscribe. And you can find me at sevenfigurebuilder.com. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.